Alright, so let's talk about the pencil and the smooth tool. These two tools work really well together. Unless you are really good with a mouse or probably using some form of tablet to draw, the pencil tool occasionally is going to be a little sketchy for you. The smooth tool is going to be the tool that comes back and kind of helps smooth out the rough shapes that you've created. So the shortcut for the pencil tool is N. Tap N on your keyboard and that'll get your pencil tool for you. Click and hold on the pencil tool here and you will see that we have a couple of different tools that you can kind of utilize. The smooth tool is the main one we're going to focus on today, but you can certainly feel free to play with these other options. So with the pencil tool, what we're going to do is we're going to attempt to draw out this little C shape. Now as you notice, it's difficult to keep a good line with your pencil tool. No matter what you do, it's going to end up a little bit off. The plus side of the pencil tool is you can always click, hold, and drag back over that line to redraw. As long as you start and end on that same line, it will reconnect and it'll help you create that look. So you can see it's real janky there, and I can clean this up. If you accidentally click off or end up off of this shape, it will disconnect this entire shape. If you start on and end up off, if you start off and end up on the line, it might still mess with you. So we're making a basic C shape here. So as we make that shape, we're going to notice that nothing's really filling or adding stroke because I don't have any. You might have already had some fill and stroke pop up. So I'm going to change my stroke to a color we can see. I'm going to go to black. I'm also going to make this a larger stroke. So we can see by doing this, we can now see the shape. However, shapes like this that are drawn out, they're one line, they're one width to that line, and it's kind of boring looking. We do have options up here where it says uniform right next to your stroke size in your control panel to adjust the widths. So have variable widths where it starts small and gets thicker into the middle and then goes back to small. Or if one side of it is going to kind of taper off and the other side is going to be a big bold stroke. So that's one way to play with it. There's also a width tool, which is right here. Shift W is the shortcut. And there are a lot of tools in here to play around with. But the width tool is cool because you can click on any anchor point, click, hold, and drag, and it'll kind of thicken up that one specific anchor point and that which is around it. So this gives you a much more unique look. With the O shape here, if I click, hold, drag all the way around to create this shape, when I get to the very end here, it's going to give me a circle symbol. That circle symbol shows me that this is going to close. Now let's just assume I don't stop here. Let's assume I go too far, like this. There, it is not a connected shape. This is going to create issues when you are actually trying to fill this in. If you don't connect your shapes, one quick way to connect them is to start on one line, drag over, and connect to the other line. And that will kind of link the two together. So create your circle here as smoothly as you can, and I know it's difficult. Create a bigger stroke, and then again, play with your widths real quick. Pick a different anchor point on each side. Try to create one thicker side, one thinner side. Create a much different look to that O shape. Now the next shape is going to be a challenge because it's got much more lines to it, much more curved lines. It's going to kind of go all over the place. So the way I do shapes like this is that I struggle with actually drawing this out. So as I drag this out, I'm not going to attempt to do the whole thing. I'm going to hit it in little pieces like that. I'm going to let go of my mouse, readjust real quick, look for that dash. And when I see that dash, I know I'm reconnected to that line. I can go back over, redrawing this out. I always kind of make a rough shape with my pencil tool, come back and refine my shapes. You can do this too if you want. Again, I'm very shaky handed, so the pencil tool is a struggle for me personally. And the pencil tool as it stands generally is not there for very precise movements anyway. It's supposed to be kind of a free-flowing tool. I prefer the pen tool, typically speaking, but the pencil tool does do a good job depending on what you're trying to do with the pen tool. As long as you're trying to look for a rougher, free-flow line, it's pretty good. Now, with this shape, you can see it's rough. So I'm going to grab my smooth tool and I'm going to look at some areas on this shape that are particularly rough, like this corner right here or down here at the bottom. If I were to click on this, one click, you see it smooths up pretty well. If I were to click and drag, I can smooth out multiple anchor points, and it'll try to match kind of where I'm dragging to. Now this is not a let's make my shape perfect tool, and using this will create its own issues, don't get me wrong. You can see I have a much cleaner, much smoother shape than what I had beforehand, and that's really the key here. Try to match that shape as best you can. And again, try that whip tool again just to get used to that idea, because this really does add something to your shapes if you're kind of creating some unique widths. Now the penguin comes with its own set of challenges, and it's that the penguin is very exact here. The mouth area, some of the body, it's not as bad, it's kind of free flowing a little bit. Inside of the face, particularly these eyes right here, we're gonna have some pretty solid issues, especially around these sharp corners. They don't like to do sharp corners as a standard rule. The pencil tool doesn't. So let me zoom out of this a little bit and zoom in a different way. Bolt. So I'm going to grab my pencil tool in. What I want you to start with is the top shapes. The top shapes are going to be the mouth, the eyes. Then you're going to do the white of the interior of the body. The last shape you're going to draw is the exterior, darker shape. All right, so start with the mouth. That's a fairly easy shape. Drag around. Zooming in will help. So if you're zoomed in, it's a little easier to draw out these shapes. Feel free to kind of zoom in and try this out. Alright, so now that I've got this shape made, what I'm going to do is come back with that smooth tool, and I'm just going to try to smooth in some of these shapes. Remember, you can still use your white arrow to kind of click and drag into this and manipulate where the actual anchor points are laying. So if your anchor points are very off, like this one right here, I can always hit A, grab that, and drag that over if need be. I'm not looking for perfect in anything that we do here. I'm always just looking for good enough. So show me pretty solid work and we'll be just fine. So now that I've got the interior drawn out, I need to draw the exterior next. So I'm going to get that same pencil tool and I'm going to attempt to draw out that next area. Alright, and again, once we have that one drawn out, again coming back with that smooth tool, using your white arrow to kind of manipulate that shape. It's very difficult to be exact with the pencil tool. I'm sure you can draw better than what I did there, but it's quick, it's easy, and it's to the point. All right. Now, when I change the color of all of these shapes, so I'm going to take this middle one and I'm going to turn it white because that's what it's supposed to be. You're going to notice the face disappear. When I color this back area black, it all disappears. That is your hierarchy. That last thing that you created is always going to be the thing that's on top. So we need to make sure to set this hierarchy better. And while we're looking at this, notice that this is a red outline, a red bounding box. You're on layer 2. So by sending this to the back, you won't send it behind your worksheet. Bam, there it is to back. Your face still didn't show up. That's because your white is still on top of it. Maybe I need to select both, the white and the black. Send both of those to back. Get used to the shortcut keys, use them often. So there it is, my penguin. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of what the pencil tool can be used for. Let's look more in detail as to what the pencil tool can be used for. This white box down here at the bottom, what we're looking to create is a scene. I want to create a wide landscape. Think of most cartoons that you see. Somebody's walking along this shape or walking in front of this city, and what they're doing is they're like shifting the city to show that they're moving forward. The person never actually moves. They're just sitting there walking in place. The background is what moves behind them to show their motion. So we want to create a background scene here. What we're going to do to create this background scene is we're going to use our pencil tool to create a Western style scene using nothing but the pencil tool and gradients. That's our goal. So let's start with a basic shape. Look at this shape that we have, this white box that we have here. This is our artboard. That's where we want to be. I'm going to start down here at the bottom, creating kind of a wave going down all the way to the bottom and around. Notice I'm going off my artboard. That's okay right now. Now I want to fill this with a kind of an orangey reddish color, but if I leave it flat, it looks a little flat. So I want to play around with my gradients today. Go up to the top, window, find your gradient panel, and let's have that kind of set aside so we can use that as we go. Right here in the middle, you can see an option to swap this to a gradient as well. Now I'm going to be using colors of orange and red pretty steadily throughout this because we're creating a Western scene. The closer this Western scene is, the darker red I want it to be. So I'm going to create a kind of a burnt-ish red here to a not as burnt red. And these are all colors that you can experiment with. Don't feel like anything I say is the perfect color here. You can experiment with your colors to create your look. Now I'm going to hit G on my keyboard, or I'm going to grab my gradient tool right here, and you see the direction it goes. This gradient is currently set as a radial, which means it starts in the middle and goes out. There's places for that, but this isn't it. So I'm going to choose a linear gradient, which is right here in my gradient panel that creates a line. If I click on the bottom of this shape, hold Shift and drag up, I see that I get a darker shade towards the top if my darker shade was on the right, and a lighter shade on the bottom. Now I'm going to wiggle this down a little bit. This is going to be my front shape. I'm going to have to continually send things to the back on this. I'm going to create depth by creating two more shapes very similar to this, and they're going to get a little lighter as they go back. So I'm going to grab and create another little shape. Notice I'm getting very rough at the bottom because it's going to be covered by this other shape anyway. I'm going to give it its same gradient, but this one I'm going to drop down a little bit. I'm going to brighten it up a little bit. I'm going to start dipping towards those oranges a little bit more. I'm going to get that same gradient tool and I'm going to fade it again from the top to the bottom. And I'm going to send this shape to the back. Shift Command or Shift Control left bracket will do that for you. So that's a quick, easy way to do that. I'm going to hit N on my keyboard and I'm going to do the same thing to create a third layer of depth. Again, lightening up as I go. Play with your colors. There's nothing more important in this scenario than experimenting with your colors. There is no wrong answer. And then I'm going to add that same gradient linear line to drag this from the top to the bottom, sending this to back. So you can see how I already start to have some depth to this, and we can manipulate and change these shapes as we want. Now, in this scenario, we are in the desert out there west where we have these tall plateaus. I'm going to use my pencil tool for this, but in general, I would use a pen tool because I want sharper points. I'm going to create kind of a rough mountainy look where I've got these top mountains that are kind of cut off and flat. I want them at different lengths, different heights. These are going to be the closest ones to me, so these should be the tallest. And stopping right there. Now I'm going to go down, around, all the way again. So there are my plateaus. These are going to get a much lighter tone because they're supposed to be in the distance, right? I also want them to get brighter as they go to the top. So I want to do the opposite direction of my gradient, kind of like that. That's because they're in the distance, they're going to get brighter with the sun at the top. Looking at this, I'd say these are still a little bit on the dark side, specifically at bottom shadow. Creating some separations kind of key, and always play with the colors. You might end up with something different and better than mine. Next stage, I'm going to create some more of these plateaus, but these are going to be off in the distance. So they're going to be thin, and they're going to cut in and out of the existing one. They're going to be thinner, they're going to be shorter, they're going to be further out. Because of that, they're going to be fairly faded. I don't want them as strong as the others. And again, just jerky motions with your keyboard, with your mouse, will probably get you where you need to be with this. Closing that shape up, getting my same gradient from before. Again, lightening dramatically this one. I'm actually going to dip into the kind of the creamish colors, adding a little bit of red into this. Alright, so G, I'm going to grab this, and I'm just going to give it a light gradient pull, and I'm going to send this to the back again. Going the wrong way there. There we go. Alright, the last shape I'm going to make for this is going to be a rectangle, just like that. I'm going to send it to the back. Again, I'm going to keep it a gradient. I'm going to keep this very light yellow to another very light yellow. Being this is the sky, it can go either direction. Whichever kind of looks better for you is perfectly fine with me. So I'm going to leave mine like that. I think that looks alright. So you see how I have multiple depths because of this, right? Now, I want to mix this up. You can picture your character walking on one of these little dunes right here if you want. But you need a little bit more than that, right? So I'm going to get my pen tool out for this one. Now with my pen tool, I'm going to create some foreground items to kind of give more of that sense of depth. I'm going to create a little cactus, so just a straight line. I'm going to create a curve on the top, like this. Going down, I'm going to give it a little arm that extends out. And there's no wrong or right to anything you illustrate. Remember that. Your illustrations are your illustrations, and it's as simple as that. I think this should be a brownish color, so I'm going to go to a solid color on this one, and I'm going to look for kind of a darker brown. And by putting this kind of down here at the bottom, it gives it that sense that this is on top, right? I can duplicate this a couple of times, shrink it down, maybe rotate it so it's not so obviously, the exact same thing. Maybe draw one more while we're at it, kind of make those a little bit more distant and a little harder to see. And getting used to your pen tool is another challenge. You will get there. So shrinking this down, putting him in the distance, that'll help create some more depth for us. The last thing I want to do is I want to add a road. And again, I'm going to use my pen tool for this one because I need straight lines for this. And as you see, the pencil tool doesn't do straight lines very well. So I'm going to click over here at the bottom of this sheet. And I'm going to go up to the top of this first sand dune, creating kind of a diagonal shape. I'm going to try to match that dune with this pen tool. And then I'm going to come down to close this shape off. Now what this is this is going to be my road. So using this, I want to create kind of a road shape, a road color. So again, I'm going to go back to my gradients. I'm going to grab one that exists just to get me into a gradient. I'm going to choose dark grays here to very dark grays. So I'm going to go almost black, not quite black. It looks a little odd if you go to straight black. But we want to go to a dark gray called an 80% gray to a 90% gray. Getting my gradient tool, I want to go lighter towards me, darker away to show depth. And then I'm going to grab that same pen tool and I'm going to create a single line that's again tracking up and out, or up and tighter a little bit better to create the yellow of that line. So, well, there's my line. Once you have one of these, it's fairly simple to duplicate it and to shrink it down. Maybe even squeeze it in a little bit to make it match the other one as needed. If I really want to create depth, I would continue this look. I would start right here, go to my next line, make it a little bit thinner, and then come down again, giving that same curve as best I can. Getting that same gradient, going the same way. I might make it a little lighter as it goes out, just to again give that depth, right? It's going to look like it's getting further away if you've got that depth. I'm going to grab these two yellow lines right here. I'm going to hold Option, click and drag. I need to bring them to the front real quick and shrink them down to look like they continue. And then again, the last one, same thing. This little chunk of road is going way off into the distance. Same gradient, but we're going to go even lighter because it's even further. And same yellow lines. So now you can see by creating some very basic shapes, we can create some very detailed looks, right? This gives us some pretty interesting looks into what we're doing. By creating simple pen tools, simple pencil tool shapes, we create this all-around interesting look to what we have. We now have a world that we've created. If we were animators, we could have our person slowly walking down this road or walking through the desert to the road. The last real touch here is the fact that it looks messy because you see all this stuff on the edges. To clean this up, what you need to do is grab a rectangle of any form. We want to create a rectangle over top of this. We want to make sure that we've got the bulk of our information in it. We're going to select everything on this bottom line. Click, hold, drag all the way across this bottom stuff. If you hit Command 7 or Control 7 on your keyboard, you will create what's called a clipping mask. This clipping mask cuts it to the shape of that rectangle that you had. Now, if you notice some things are off, you can hit A, get your white arrow, select a couple anchor points and just move it over. You saw it missing over there. I can grab these bottom or these top anchor points and drag them down to kind of create a shorter look, just like that. And all of a sudden I have my scene. Basic pencil tool techniques created this scene. This is what you should be able to create. Depth with gradients, depth with shapes. Take your screenshot and turn that into today's assignment.